GCW Massacre in Maine pretty much needs to change its name to Snoozefest in Maine, because this was ultimately a boring show. Now sure, there was some good stuff on here, but the overall arc of what was supposed to be a continuation of 3 GCW shows in one weekend took a nosedive in the middle here. So in this video, I'll go over the good, the bad, and the outright boring that didn't move me at all. And you would think out of all the matches that I wouldn't say were boring, I wouldn't think it would be the names Danhausen and Shotzi Blackheart in a match. Now when you look at the match of Danhausen versus Shotzi on paper, it may not wow you quality wise, but you would at least be entertained if you like either of these two. But it was something about this match that just evaporated my experience watching this. This was a nothing match quality wise and entertainment wise. Now the only thing I did like was the finish. Danhausen hit a chokeslam on standing chairs and that finally woke me up. But the problem is, it was the finish. So I liked the finish, but I didn't like that this was the finish, because I had to sit through a bunch of nothing just to get there, and it pretty much ends at just 1 3/4 stars. However, there was at least something that was actually good on this show. Dezmond vs. Charles Mason for the Limitless World title did end up being the best match on the show at 3.5 stars. They had decent amount of time, crowd investment, and a nice structure to at least give this show some credibility. But the only issue is, this was the ceiling of the entire show. And seeing as how we had 9 matches and this was the ceiling, this show didn't stand a chance. And speaking of not standing a chance, that's what a whole lot of this show exemplified. You see, the problem with Massacre in Maine is that the majority of the show just felt like everyone was going through motions at times. Take, for example, the opener. Hazard versus Smiley versus TJ Crawford versus Modar versus Seabass versus Ryan O'Neal. It was a solid opener, yes, but I keep harping on how GCW Scramble matches used to be. It used to have energy, personality, action. I mean, hell, we saw that just last month. But now we're just back to just okay. Yes, all guys worked hard, but in the end, it was a 2 1/4 star match. Another match was Top Team versus Miracle Generation. Now, Miracle Generation, they're one of my favorite tag teams on the indie scene, but this match did not show why. It was a 2.5 star match that didn't really have enough runway to develop. And if you want to talk about lame, let's talk about the main event, which was originally supposed to be Effie versus Ricky Morton for the GCW World title. Then it turned into a tag team match player with Effie, Joey Janela, and Ricky Morton against Atticus Cogar, Kerry Morton, and KJ Orso. And look, I get it. It's building feuds, especially for the third and final show of this stretch. But the execution of this was just so lazy, and the match itself was just there at just 2 1/4 stars. I was completely checked out at this point. But what may have started me checking out to begin with was probably a match with another tag team that I thoroughly enjoy. I was really looking forward to Bustah and the Brain versus Starstruck for the GCW World Tag Team titles. GCW versus Limitless. And look, the match was good, much like the Limitless World title match. But here's the thing. This match structure had some issues, unlike the Limitless title match. This could have been way better with that type of improvement. I gave this 3 1/4 stars, but on paper, this should have been arguably been the match of the night easily. But speaking of structure, some other matches had the right idea, but in the end, it didn't elevate the show at all. Ace Romero vs. Marcus Mathers was a good basic size difference match at 3 stars. It had structure. It controlled the pace well. It had a clear purpose. But in the end, it was just good. Not something that the show desperately needed to get above water as things were cooking. Then you got Vandal 48 versus Savage GnomeDozer at 3 1/4 stars. This was also standard good stuff. It was simple, fine, but it doesn't leave an impression. It just exists. And that's the bigger picture of Massacre in Maine right there. Match after match just existed without really fighting to grab your attention or even make you care about what happens next. And the crazy part is, this show had something that I had low expectations for that actually exceeded them. And I still felt underwhelmed. I haven't been crazy about Maki, Itoh, or KJ or Orso lately in the ring wise, but to their credit, their match was better than expected as far as this goes. At 2.25 stars, I could say this may be the only positive thing I can say about this show, since it at least passed my expectations. But it wasn't enough to grab me into thinking we were going on a ride of progressive action throughout this show, in which we didn't. So here's the bottom line. Despite GCW Massacre in Maine having a long line outside the venue, the wait for something that would pop out on my screen felt like a longer wait. This to me was not a good show for me. It was just there. Nothing grabbed me or excited me for what was next. Ultimately, it was just boring to watch, despite some solid stuff on here. If my expectations are met depending on what they are, my experience can be indifferent, and that's what this show basically was. A very anticlimactic show with anticlimactic booking throughout. This gets a 6.25 out of 10. Not recommended.